might kill me for this one. What's up? Hello, it's Lit Life with Miranda Reads, and today we're talking about The Old Boys. By Old Boys, I am doing books that were published at least 100 years ago, could be more. So if you're anything like me, you want to read those old boys, those old books, those pretty cover, gorgeous looking books. However, you don't know whether or not they're worth your time. Is the language too much? Is the plot too slow? If I read this book, would it be a waste? I'm glad your ass and I got you covered. So without further ado, let's get started. Actually, before we get started, let me do a quick thing out here. I feel like there's this pressure, like this societal pressure to love old books. But there's been so many times that I have read these so-called classics, and I'm like, I see what you did here, but I hated it. I hated every word. I hated their actions, their reactions, the text, the language, everything about it sucked. Doesn't change the fact that this has had historical importance. Just personally, I didn't like it. So as a fair warning, I might not like your classics. I might think they're awful. And I think it's fine. You can hate whatever you want. I can hate whatever I want. All of the authors are dead, so like, they're not gonna care at this point. Anyway, let's get started. I feel like I'm gonna ruffle a lot of feathers with this one right away, but Alice in Wonderland, worth it? If you're curious, I have purchased most of the fancy book covers from Barnes & Noble. They have these collectible editions, and I've been collecting them for like the last 10 years or so. There's a little girl named Alice. She falls down a rabbit hole. She goes through Wonderland. She shrinks, she grows, she eats some magic mushrooms. Then eventually she pops back up to the top side. This book is a little bit difficult to get into. And it's not like it's because it's too dense, because I feel like that does happen with quite a few older books. They just feel really, really dense. And this one, it didn't feel super dense. It just felt very nonsensical and annoyingly nonsensical. By the end of it, I was done with this book. I mean, it is a very, very short read, so like it does have that going for it. Most copies are illustrated, which is also a huge plus, I think. But as far as the actual book, for me, not worth it. For you, I would say if you're really curious, if you're a huge fan of Disney, maybe you want to see what the original book is like. And in that case, I would say, okay, go for it. Oh, so this one's actually a little bit older of a book I have, and it's my Anne of Green Gables copy. It's missing its cover jacket, but I like the way the spine looks. I normally keep this one on one of my shelves, so you only ever see the spine, so I think it's fine. But I'll put this one here, where you can kind of see it, and I'll grab my other copy. Okay, so this is my childhood copy of Anne of Green Gables. So this is, I swear, one of the quintessential childhood books. We follow Anne. She's adopted by Matthew and Marilla. They're a brother and sister, and they're getting older, and they think that they're adopting a boy to help out on the farm. Well, they accidentally have adopted Anne. And at first, Marilla wants to send her back, but there's just something about Anne and something about her innocence and her dreaminess that they keep her. And then she becomes Anne of Green Gables. She gets up to all kinds of hijinks, etc., etc. So for this one, I absolutely love this book. The language, it's a little bit different from today, but nothing like horrible. It's quite easy to read, and it's just a very engaging story. There isn't some sort of a big evil creature to fight. We are just watching Anne as she lives her life, and she gets into all kinds of trouble. So I definitely think this one is worth it. It's super cute. It's a lot of fun, and it definitely transports you to a different era. Wuthering Heights. So this book is really, I would say, love or hate. There are people who will die for this book, and there are people who would die before they had to read this book. This one focuses mostly on Heathcliff and Catherine. They're both awful people. They're both kind of like in a love-hate relationship. and they essentially just kind of make each other miserable. Like, I've only read this one once, so take that with a grain of salt, but it was only a few years ago, so I don't think my opinion would have changed that much. For the most part, I enjoyed this book. I mean, there is a little bit more of a language barrier than something like Anne of Green Gables. It does take a little bit to get used to the cadence of the words, the word choice, and even the societal things where you're just like, I don't know what that is, and then you find out that it's just a fancy footstool. So like, keeping that in mind, I thought this one was an enjoyable read. I would say it would be worth it if you have a rainy day and nothing else to read. Would it be my very first choice of the old books? Probably not. Pride and Prejudice. Okay, technically this is like 7 novels of Jane Austen, but I don't actually have like a separate copy of Pride and Prejudice. I should get one. It's probably one of the most famous books out there. It's been done, redone, and redone like a million times. Like, I tell you, anywhere you look, movies, music, books, there's Pride and Prejudice, like right there. So for this one, is it worth reading in its original format? I have a hard time reading Pride and Prejudice. I absolutely love the story, I love the movies, I love the BBC miniseries, but I do have trouble reading the original book. It is a little bit of a uphill battle to try and get set into the words and set into like how their sentences are structured, the text, the terms, etc., etc. But at the same time, I would say it's worth it. So how do I say this? How can I tell you that something is worth it when I don't enjoy reading the book? Audiobooks. When I listen to it on audiobook, my eyes aren't stumbling over the words. I am just reading it and enjoying the moment. And I have listened to this one on audiobook at least 4 times within the last 5-6 years. So it's definitely one of my favorites, and I honestly am planning on going in for another reread because so good. It is hugely worth a read. It is so magical. Next one we have is probably my most, well, actually I have two really controversial reviews on Goodreads. First one is Metamorphosis. So in this one, our main character, he gets turned into a bug. He acts more and more bug-like until his family lets him die and then moves back into his room. Now, I am speaking from a casual reader, not a historian. And if you ever go to my Goodreads review, you'll see what people have said about me on this one. But in all honesty, this book is miserable. It's not an enjoyable read. Does it have historical importance? Yeah, probably. Does that mean I enjoyed reading the book? Nah. So for this one, it has this cloying feel, like where, like, you know those situations where like everything you do is wrong and everything that you do wrong is coming back to bite you? That's what it kind of felt like reading this book. You just kind of get this increasing level of dread. Is it a good book? Is it an enjoyable read? No. I don't think it's worth a read. I don't think it is a fun one. I don't think it's something that I would want to spend my time on. The next one we're going to talk about is Animal Farm. Now, Animal Farm is one of the very first reviews that I got rid of on Goodreads. And it's honestly just because people were nasty. So in Animal Farm, this is supposed to be a huge allegory for what was happening with communism at the time. But as far as the actual book, you follow a bunch of talking animals. The pigs start taking advantage of the system. They start to work the other animals to the death, and then we have the death of a few of the main characters. I really had a hard time enjoying any aspect of this book. Now, I know, like, from Goodreads, and the general gist of the comments was that I didn't enjoy it because I didn't get it. I didn't understand the historical context. I wasn't smart enough to comprehend what the author was doing with this book. However, I maintain if you go into this book completely blind to the historical context, you're left with like a really disjointed story. I feel like the characters in this book are not fleshed out at all. They don't have very real personalities. The actions that they do are not really consistent, character-wise or plot-wise. It does fit very well with the historical context of what is happening, but it's so short and it cuts out a lot of the reasoning that you're left with like this book where animals just do horrible things because, not even because reasons, just because. And as a story, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And that was the first case where like people really got mad at me on Goodreads. After about a year of them commenting on my review, I realized that they weren't really gonna let up at all. And one day the review's gone now. So, I don't know how much of it is like kind of like the fandom influencing me as well, but I just have a lot of negative memories associated with that book. It's very much more of like a history or English book rather than like an actual like book for your enjoyment. All right, so next one is 12 Years a Slave, and this is a true story, and it's been verified by pretty much every verification that they are able to do. We follow a man who is a free black man. He is tricked and he is sold into slavery. He spends 12 years as a slave. He makes it out back to his family and then writes a book about the experience. Now this book, it's emotional. It is extremely well written. It's absolutely riveting. In every aspect about it, it is truly one of the best books out there. And I love it and I would recommend it so much. I would say it is worth every single page. If you can find yourself a copy, it is just incredible. Jane Eyre. Jane is in love with books. She's in love with education. Despite having nothing to her name, she manages to make her way in this world. And she ends up finding love. And there's a pretty big plot twist that I won't give away, even though it's been out for like hundreds of years. But like the first time I read the plot twist, I remember being like absolutely shooken. So I'm gonna keep that in mind for you all. I loved it. It's one of the very first books I remember reading and my heart was actually racing. Not because I was scared at all, it's just really intensely invested in the book. So keeping that in mind, I would definitely say this one is worth a read. Okay. We got one more for you. You ready for this? Little Woman. 4 sisters, last name March. So we follow the 4 March sisters as they wait for their father to come home from war. We go on different adventures with each sister. Each has a very distinctive personality. This is one of those books where it reads well in almost any era. And it's just such an enjoyable one, and it's such a classic. The language, I honestly didn't have a problem with all. I loved the vibrant characters. I adored how much fun they were to watch as they grew up and grew older and went on adventure after adventure after adventure. All in all, this one is totally worth it. All right, that's it. That is my worth it or nope for this time for Ye Old Books. I'd love to hear your comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have any suggestions? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and happy reading. Bye.